What if the tension between men and women isn't really about communication, needs, or love, but something far older, something buried deep within the human soul? According to Carl Jung, our misunderstandings aren't just emotional, they're archetypal. What women want and what men need are not always what they seem. In this episode, we explore the silent architecture of the human psyche and the unconscious forces that shape how men and women feel desire and disconnect. Stay with me and allow this to not just inform your mind, but touch your inner world. Ladies and gentlemen, Carl Jung did not believe that men and women are simply different by nature. He believed they are different in how they carry the inner world within themselves. According to Jung, the psyche is not flat. It has structure, and within that structure lives something mysterious, something powerful, a psychic duality. Every man, Jung believed, contains within him an inner feminine, the Anima, and every woman, an inner masculine, the Animus. These are not just energies or traits, but living symbolic forces. They influence how we love, how we suffer, what we expect from others, and what we are blind in ourselves. And it is this inner divide that shapes what a woman seeks from life, and what a man longs for without understanding why. The Anima in a man is a soul image, a gateway to emotion, vulnerability, intuition, creativity, and the feeling function. She represents a capacity to feel life fully, to be touched by beauty, to surrender to mystery. But many men are taught, consciously or not, to fear these qualities. To feel deeply is to be weak, to open is to be broken, to express is to lose control. So the Anima is pushed into the shadows, buried beneath the pressure to remain composed, rational, and in command. The cost of that repression? Emotional starvation. A man cut off from his Anima becomes hardened, directionless, and spiritually cold. He may perform well in the world, succeed, achieve, conquer, but something remains missing. He chases women not out of love, but out of unconscious hunger. The Anima, now repressed within, is projected onto real women, often idealized, romanticized, and misunderstood. She becomes not a partner, but a mirror for his unclaimed soul. And so he doesn't just desire her, he needs her, often desperately, not for who she is, but for who he has lost within himself. For women, the picture is equally complex. Jung believed that within every woman lives the Animus, her inner masculine. This Animus is not a mere symbol of logic or strength. It is her connection to independence, inner authority, clarity of vision, and self-direction. But just as men are taught to avoid feeling, many women are taught to doubt their voice, to soften themselves, to accommodate, to define worth through relationship. When the Animus is unintegrated, it doesn't disappear, it distorts. The woman may become emotionally overwhelmed, yet intellectually defensive. Her thoughts may grow rigid. She may become controlling or constantly seek validation from men while simultaneously resenting them. Just as the man projects his Anima onto women, the woman projects her Animus onto men, often falling for men who are emotionally unavailable, distant, or controlling. Why? Because they reflect the very Animus she has yet to claim within herself. So we arrive at a painful paradox. The man, disconnected from feeling, seeks emotional presence in women. The woman, unsure of her inner authority, seeks strength in men. Each looks outward for what is missing inward. Each projects, each longs, each suffers, and what they believe they want, connection, passion, understanding, is only a surface expression of what the psyche truly seeks. Wholeness. But projection never leads to wholeness. It leads to confusion, disappointment, and cycles of longing that never fulfill. Because what women want and what men need cannot be found fully in the other, not until the inner relationship is restored, not until the Anima and Animus are brought back from the shadows and integrated into consciousness. Jung's message was never one of blame. He did not say men are wrong for desiring or women are wrong for wanting. He said we suffer because we are unconscious of the forces that shape our desires. We walk through life half awake, pulled by ancient energies we do not see. And until we face them, they rule us. When a man begins to feel, not just react, but truly feel, he begins to meet his Anima. He creates, he dreams, he listens. And in doing so, he stops demanding emotional labor from women, because he's finally building his own emotional foundation. When a woman begins to hear her inner voice, not the noise of insecurity, but the calm clarity of the Animus, she becomes grounded, rooted in her own authority. And she no longer seeks men to give her value, because she knows who she is with or without them. This is not the end of romance. It's the beginning of real union, not as two broken people trying to complete each other, but as two whole psyches meeting with awareness. So what women want and what men need may seem like opposites, but they are actually invitations. Invitations to return to the inner world, where the true marriage of Anima and Animus takes place. That is Carl Jung's truth about the psyche. Not separation, but integration. Not blame, but understanding. And not projection, but presence. What if the emotional rhythms of men and women are not only different, but opposite in their direction of flow? Carl Jung believed that men and women are not simply wired differently by biology or culture, but by the deep architecture of the psyche. He saw that the emotional needs of the feminine and masculine energies flow in contrasting patterns. Women are naturally drawn to emotional expansion, to go deeper, to connect, to merge. Men, on the other hand, are often unconsciously pulled toward emotional grounding, to stabilize, to contain, to find clarity in stillness. This difference, though subtle, is the root of much unspoken frustration between genders. A woman, Jung would say, seeks to dissolve into the moment emotionally. Her psyche desires presence, intimacy, expression. She doesn't necessarily want to be solved. She wants to be felt with. Her inner world is fluid, alive, and when she trusts, she opens. This act of emotional vulnerability is not weakness. It's an offering, an invitation into the depth of her soul. But when she isn't met emotionally, when her longing for connection is dismissed or ignored, she feels abandoned. Not always by the man, but by the container she believed he represented. The masculine psyche, in contrast, is wired to seek emotional grounding, not escape, but control. A man often feels most safe when emotions are stable, defined, and contained. This doesn't mean he doesn't feel deeply. It means that deep feeling often threatens his inner sense of order. So, when faced with emotional expression, especially when it's chaotic or overwhelming, his first instinct is not always to connect, but to restore structure. He retreats, he withdraws, he tightens, not because he doesn't care, but because he doesn't know how to swim in what he hasn't been taught to hold. And so we see the gap form. A woman reaches out emotionally, hoping to feel seen, heard, joined. But the man, in attempting to preserve calm, shuts down, interprets it as emotional overload, or tries to fix it logically. To her, this feels cold. To him, her desire for deeper connection may feel endless, impossible to satisfy, not because she is too much, but because he has not yet found grounding in his own emotional center. This is not a matter of right or wrong. Jung warned that the inner feminine and inner masculine are deeply misunderstood in modern life. Women are told they are too emotional. Men are told they are too emotionally unavailable. But from a Jungian view, both are simply mirroring their own unconscious inner work. A woman whose inner animus is underdeveloped often externalizes her emotional longing. She may rely heavily on relationships for identity and validation, not because she is weak, but because she has not yet formed an inner container strong enough to hold her depth. Her emotional expansion becomes a cry for someone to hold what she cannot yet hold herself. Likewise, a man who has not integrated his anima will fear emotional intimacy. He may find emotional closeness overwhelming, even threatening. Instead of opening, he builds walls. Instead of feeling with, he detaches. But he's not rejecting love. He's unconsciously protecting a part of himself he doesn't yet understand. His psyche tells him, to feel deeply is to lose control. To become vulnerable is to risk breaking. And so both suffer. She longs for depth, but does not feel held. He needs grounding, but does not know how to stay open while holding space. Both misread each other. She sees distance and thinks, he doesn't care. He sees emotion and thinks, I'm not enough. But in truth, they are touching each other's unhealed edges. This is where Jung's wisdom becomes more than theory. It becomes medicine. He taught that the anima and animus are not just internal energies. They're inner guides. When a woman strengthens her animus, she begins to hold herself emotionally. Her longing for a man provides safety or clarity diminishes, not because she no longer wants love, but because she no longer feels incomplete. She becomes emotionally anchored. And now, when she expands emotionally, it's not from emptiness, but from fullness. When a man integrates his anima, he no longer fears his emotions. He learns to feel deeply without drowning. He becomes a steady presence, not by avoidance, but by inner rootedness. Now, when a woman opens emotionally, he does not collapse or flee. He listens, holds, responds, not from fear, but from connection. This is the alchemy of relationship, when inner work meets outer connection. What she wants, emotional depth, no longer feels overwhelming to him. What he needs, emotional grounding, no longer feels distant to her. They are no longer reaching for each other to be saved, but to be met. The feminine expands, the masculine grounds. And when both meet in consciousness, something beautiful happens. Intimacy becomes possible, not as dependency, but as sacred exchange. So the emotional tension between men and women isn't personal. It's archetypal. And when we realize that, we stop blaming each other and begin listening deeper. This is a quiet truth Jung tried to leave behind, not in textbooks, but in the hearts of those willing to look within. We rarely desire what we consciously understand. What we crave, especially in love and connection, in longing, is often not what we truly need, but what we project. Carl Jung described this phenomenon as one of the central forces shaping human relationships. The psyche, he said, doesn't simply respond to reality. It distorts it, reshapes it, coats it in the imagery of the unconscious. And when it comes to romantic desire, men and women are often chasing not a real person, but a reflection of their own inner world. This is what Jung called projection, the unconscious act of placing one's inner contents onto another person. In men, this often takes the form of the anima projection, the inner feminine cast outward onto a woman. She becomes not just a partner, but a symbol of a soul. Her presence evokes awe, desire, even obsession. But it's not really her he's seeing. It's what she awakens in him. It's the feeling of aliveness, depth, or softness that he has lost touch with in himself. For women, the projection works differently, but just as powerfully. The animus projection is the unconscious masculine within, the voice of reason, logic, willpower, and inner authority. When projected onto a man, he appears strong, decisive, grounded. She may feel drawn to his power or his mystery. But again, it's not him that she truly desires. It's the part of her that he seems to reflect back, the part she hasn't yet fully integrated. This is why relationships that begin with overwhelming intensity often collapse under their own weight, because the person we were so magnetically drawn to is not who they really are. It's who we needed them to be. A man may chase a woman who embodies his unconscious ideal, perhaps graceful, emotionally open, radiant. He calls it love. But beneath that love is often a hunger for wholeness. What he truly seeks is reconnection with his inner anima, his feelings, his intuition, his soul. The woman simply becomes the mirror. And when she fails to live up to that fantasy, when she shows her humanness, her moods, her limits, the projection shatters and disappointment sets in. He may feel betrayed, but in truth, he was never really in love with her. He was in love with the symbol. Women experience the same distortion. She may fall deeply for a man who seems bold, confident, emotionally detached yet magnetic. He gives her the illusion of safety, of purpose. But what she's really chasing is the animus within, her own unclaimed strength, her own forgotten voice. And when the man she thought was powerful turns out to be fragile, uncertain, or emotionally distant, the image collapses. She is left not only disillusioned, but confused. Why was I so drawn to him? Why does it feel like something was stolen from me? The truth is, nothing was stolen, but something unconscious was projected and then withdrawn. Jung warned that this process, while painful, is not a failure. It is a first step toward individuation. The moment we realize we were projecting, we are given a chance to take back what we placed outside of us. That depth we saw in her, it's your own soul asking to be felt. That strength you saw in him, it's your own voice waiting to be claimed. But as long as these projections remain unconscious, they control us. We chase relationships for fulfillment, but we're really chasing parts of ourselves. We seek emotional connection, but we don't understand that what we want from others is rooted in what we haven't given ourselves. This is why Jung believed romantic love is often the arena of our greatest suffering. Not because others are cruel, but because our unconscious expects them to complete us. We're asking others to carry the weight of our unlived psyche. And they can't. They shouldn't. It's not their role. This realization doesn't kill love. It purifies it. Because once the projections dissolve, we are finally able to see the other person as they are, not as a fantasy, not as a mirror, but as a soul on their own journey. And only from that space can real connection begin. A man who has met his anima becomes capable of deep emotional presence. He no longer needs a woman to feel for him. He has reclaimed his own feeling. A woman who has embraced her animus no longer needs a man to validate her sense of direction. She has found her own inner compass. When they come together, it is not from need, but from wholeness. But this path is not easy. It requires heartbreak, reflection, humility. It demands that we face the illusions we've loved and let them go, to realize that the woman was never your savior. The man was never your protector. They were reminders, gateways. They showed you what lived inside you all along. So what women want and what men need may not always be about each other. It's about what they've lost contact with themselves and what they unconsciously search for through the other. Projection turns the other into a fantasy. Integration turns the self into a source. And only when we stop looking for salvation in others can we begin to love them for who they are, not who we hoped they would be. That is the work Jung calls us to. Not less love, but deeper awareness. Not romantic illusions, but soulful connection. Not longing for completion, but becoming complete within. What women want and what men need. These aren't just cultural questions or romantic debates. From Carl Jung's perspective, they're reflections of a deeper truth. The human psyche is divided, and as long as we look to others to complete that inner split, we will remain unfulfilled. Jung believed that every individual contains both masculine and feminine psychological components. In a man, the unconscious feminine is called the anima, the feeling, intuitive, emotional side. In a woman, it's the animus, the thinking, assertive, directional side. Most people, however, are unconscious of these inner opposites. They don't see them as parts of themselves. They project them onto others. And that's where things begin to unravel. A man might search for a woman to awaken his sensitivity, warmth, and soulfulness. A woman might look for a man to give her strength, guidance, and clarity. But in doing so, they bypass their own psychological development. They don't integrate their inner opposites. They outsource them. And this outsourcing makes them dependent, disappointed, and confused. The truth is, no one can complete you. No man can give a woman lasting inner confidence. No woman can awaken a man's soul permanently. That work must be done within. The desire for a partner is natural, but the need for a partner to fulfill your internal emptiness is not. It's a signal that you've left parts of yourself unexplored, unloved, unclaimed. That's why Jung said that the goal of human life is individuation, the process of becoming whole by integrating all parts of the psyche. This includes the shadow, the unconscious desires, the repressed feelings, and crucially, the inner opposite, the anima or animus. Until a man turns inward and meets his anima, he will keep chasing women not for who they are, but for what they represent. He will idealize beauty, emotion, and nurturing, and be crushed when the woman he loves fails to sustain the fantasy. His relationships will be emotional roller coasters because they're built not on reality, but on projections. And until a woman faces her animus, she will continue looking to men for direction, validation, or authority. She might swing between attraction to power and resentment of control. Her longing for strength outside of herself will keep her in a cycle of dependency and frustration. But when a man meets his anima, when he learns to feel, to soften, to listen to his emotional body, something changes. He stops needing a woman to rescue him from his emotional numbness. He becomes grounded, emotionally available, creatively alive. He may still love deeply, but he no longer loves blindly. And when a woman embraces her animus, When she discovers her voice, her boundaries, her inner logic, she becomes centered. She doesn't need a man to validate her worth or give her purpose. She brings her own direction, her own power into the relationship. This is a psychological union that Jung pointed toward, not a romantic fairy tale, but an inner marriage. When the masculine and feminine are united within, the individual no longer seeks salvation outside. Love becomes a choice, not a compulsion. Desire becomes connection, not a transaction. Relationships are no longer built on hidden needs, but on shared presence. Of course, this path is not easy. The integration of the anima or animus is often painful. It involves confronting your projections, accepting your illusions, grieving the parts of yourself you abandoned. But this grief is sacred. It clears the space for authentic selfhood. There is no shortcut. You cannot bypass your own wholeness by clinging to someone else. You cannot skip the inner work by romanticizing the outer connection. Real union begins when you realize the other person is not your missing piece. You are your own completion. So what do women truly want? At the core, they want to feel deeply, fully, safely. But unless they create that emotional depth within, they will always seek men who trigger it and blame them when it fades. And what do men truly need? They need meaning, grounding, and emotional honesty. But unless they reclaim those qualities internally, they'll keep projecting them outward and feeling lost when relationships don't provide them. Jung wasn't against love. He was for conscious love, love that arises not from lack, but from wholeness, love that sees the other not as a rescuer or a fantasy, but as a mirror and companion, love that honors individuality and embraces the mystery of another person without needing them to fill a void. And that's the paradox. The more whole you become, the more capable you are of true connection, not because you need it, but because you choose it freely, fully, and without projection. Integration doesn't kill desire. It purifies it. It turns a hunger for completion into the joy of presence. It transforms desperate longing into soulful intimacy. And in that space, man and woman can finally meet, not as looking for completion, but as whole beings ready to share the beauty of their inner union. And so, what women want and what men need are not opposites to be battled over, but reflections of the inner opposites we've neglected within ourselves. Women, in truth, seek emotional connection, safety, and the courage to feel deeply, not just from men, but from within their own psyches. Men, on the other hand, long for meaning, emotional grounding, and the right to be vulnerable, not through a woman's validation, but through reclaiming their own forgotten sensitivity. Carl Jung didn't offer formulas for perfect relationships. He offered a mirror, one that shows us that our romantic suffering is often a cry from the unconscious, a signal that we projected our unlived parts onto someone else, a reminder that the real love story is not just between man and woman, but between who we are and who we are meant to become. The psyche is not complete when it finds the perfect partner. It is complete when the inner masculine and inner feminine recognize each other, not as enemies, not as strangers, but as parts of the same soul. Heal the projections. Reclaim the opposite within. And then, and only then, does love stop being a battlefield and start becoming a sanctuary. That is Jung's truth about the psyche. And perhaps it's the deepest truth about ourselves.